office of the sheriff began through the reign of Alfred the Great in the mid-800s. In England, the districts were called shires. The king's representative in that shire was called a reeve. And that's how we get the name sheriff. It's a blending of the terms shire reeve. It was the sheriff's duty at that time to enforce the command of the king. And that's how it was for over 300 years. And then we fast forward to the reign of King John. King John was a ruthless king, a tyrannical king. One bishop said of John in that day that even hell will be fouled by the presence of John. And John's taxes were so high, and if you could not afford to pay your taxes, you were arrested by the shire reeve. You were thrown into prison, mutilated. John was ordering the shire reeves to cut off the hands, the feet, the ears, to cut the tongues out of people. John is the king in the Robin Hood stories, but the shire reeve, the sheriff of Nottingham, is always the one doing the bidding of the king, going around and collecting the taxes. Most people in America will tell you that Robin Hood robbed from the rich to give to the poor. That's not true. Robin Hood was not a socialist engaging in redistribution of wealth. Robin Hood was standing against a tyrannical king. It was the sheriff of Nottingham doing the bidding of the tyrannical king. Robin Hood was not taking from the rich to give to the poor. Robin Hood was taking from the king and the crown the money that had been stolen from the people through oppressive and unlawful taxation, returning it to the people so they could live. Whether Robin Hood is a legend or a real person, the story of Robin Hood is Robin Hood giving people their lives back. Because you see, there's going to be a big rebellion against John. A big rebellion that results in a liberty charter called the Magna Carta of 1215. And through the Magna Carta, the shire reeve is transformed from a tyrannical, forceful arm of the king to a defender of the rights of the people.
Heavenly Father, I thank you for the gift of another day and the opportunity you've given me to be a difference in somebody's life today. I pray that you give me strength and courage as I face the evils that are here on earth. I pray that you give me wisdom to make the right decisions. And I pray that you guide my footsteps as I walk through the valley of darkness. In your precious Son, Jesus Christ's name, amen.
The office of the sheriff is more important than people realize.
The sheriff is the ultimate local check and balance on the abuse of power in all government.
The fact that the sheriff is an elected office means that he works for the people, and his promise to the people is his oath of office, his oath to the Constitution.
And that's why this is important. We don't teach this at the academies.
We want to acquaint the people in their communities with the duty and role of the sheriff.
And we haven't taught this for a very long time. You know, it's interesting, we used to know it. I mean, go dig out the movies from the 60s and the 70s where the federal agents, the FBI, show up on in the town and try to throw their federal badges around, and the sheriff comes on and says, you don't have jurisdiction in my town, or everything has to come through me. See, we used to know these things. But a failure to educate combined with an agenda to revise the role of the sheriff, almost quite ironically back to the role that we came from, is why our sheriffs today don't understand just how important they are, just how vital they are to the defense of our rights, our life, our liberty, our property, and why the American people don't know this standard of the sheriff.
Why is it that the police academies all across this country never address the oath of office? Yet every single cop has to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. Why don't we examine what the role of law enforcement, of sheriffs, of chiefs of police, what is our role in the protection of the American Republic, of our constitutional republic? The ultimate goal of all three branches of government, and we're the executive branch, we're the executors of the law, is to protect liberty. And if we have to do that against the FBI or the IRS or the EPA or the CDC or the USDA, then that's our job. Sheriffs, let's do our duty and protect the people from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, as we've promised to do, and save our country. We have the power. If the sheriffs of this country will just unite and be unified in keeping their oath of office and defending the American people against oppression and abuse of government, we could take back our country tomorrow.
The office of the sheriff is so the individual never has to stand alone in defense of their liberty. If the duty and the purpose of the sheriff today was just to blindly enforce the law,
Almost like a henchman of the king,
then what was the purpose of the 180 transformation in 1215?
all history is a development, is a progression of people learning lessons from circumstances.
It's that whole transformation that occurs in 1215, Clause 61 of the Magna Carta, that gives us the strongest evidence, the strongest foundation for understanding that the sheriff is our defender.
Answerable directly to the people. That's a critical development.
And so what you have is the people standing up as a whole in defense of their rights, a rebellion against the king. And as a product of that rebellion, their victory over a tyrant who was using the violence, the force. This is the beautiful part. A tyrant of tyrants' ages using the force of a sheriff to be his arm of oppression, mutilation, and murder. And the people say, no more tyrants. And to prove that point, we are taking this sheriff away from you as a weapon for you and turning him into a shield against you for us. This amazing transformation of the sheriff, I believe, is one of the best illustrations in history on the people understanding the value of liberty and what it takes to not just simply defend it, but maintain it. Samuel Adams said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties nor be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved." He said, on the contrary, when the people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders. In 1776, our founders did some really great things. And a lot of times we think that that great thing, the one thing they did for us was declare independence from Great Britain. Well, in reality, even more magnificent than that was their step forward to not just simply declare independence from Great Britain, but to declare independence from kings forever.
That's what makes the foundation of our nation so strong, is the framework of our republic came through us from over 800 years, almost 1,000 years of history and lessons learned.
And the office of the sheriff was part of that, a cornerstone piece in ensuring that we'd have no more kings. An immediate check and balance in your neighborhood with someone you know.
I think the critical importance of that people-sheriff connection, of the sheriff being chosen by the people, the sheriff working directly for the people.
The sheriff is one of us. He's a direct representative of the people. He's directly accountable to us. He's directly accessible by us. He's got skin in the game. Our sheriff is our friend. He's our family and he's our defender. That's who the real sheriff is supposed to be.
I think it makes a big difference that the sheriff is elected by the people. There are other areas of law enforcement where the positions are appointed.
Not a hireling of the governor. He is not a hireling of the county. He doesn't have to do the bidding of the city manager. He is not beholden to one person or one agency for a paycheck.
That's how it should work. That's the role of the sheriff. And that's why the sheriff is so important. Because, by the way, the sheriff is a lot closer than most of your legislators or your governors. Your sheriff is your neighbor. Your sheriff lives in your community. The legislators and the governor go off, to the Emerald City in the land of Oz and develop this culture of this sense of being disconnected from the people in the communities that they serve. And by the way, the lobbyists park themselves in the same town where the legislators are. In normal circumstances, no one's lining the pockets of your sheriff. No lobbyist is controlling your sheriff. No special interest group is controlling your sheriff. Your sheriff works directly for the people in his or her community.
A police chief. He's appointed by the municipality. State police is appointed by the Department of Public Safety, here in New Mexico. The sheriff is elected by the people. Okay? They vote for who they want in there. It adds a lot more responsibility to it. We try to do a lot within the community. We try to have those interactions with the community when it's not a call for service. Okay? When it's a good thing, not possibly a bad thing. Treat these people as you would want to be treated. Okay? Treat them right. Let's be respectful to them. I'm not going to violate my constituents' civil rights based on an overreaching government. So educate yourself, know what you're doing, and do the right thing.
And the power he holds is bound by a duty, summed in the oath of office. I do solemnly swear I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of my state.
Your number one job is to defend the rights, the life, liberty, and property of the people in your community. Just having that understanding and that prioritization that this is what's first, protecting people's individual rights. That's first. That's what you took an oath to do.
You cannot support a law that contradicts the constitutions and still uphold your duty to support the constitutions.
The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, the supreme law of the state, and since it is, then all laws must be in line with that Constitution. So you can't have the Constitution saying you have a right to free speech, you have a right to freedom of assembly, you have a right to be secure in your property, you have a right to due process, and then somehow the legislature comes up with a law that contradicts those enumerated rights in your Constitution. Well, if you're a sheriff that took an oath to the Constitution, then that's your standard. So some decree issued by a governor that violates those enumerated rights, well, you're then put in a position of having to make a choice. Well, you didn't take an oath to the legislature. You didn't take an oath to the governor. You didn't take an oath to some other politician. You took an oath to the Constitution, which means the rule of law and the rights of the people. That's what you took an oath to be a defender of the people's rights. So guess what? An emotional legislature, a reactionary legislature, a corrupt legislature, a well-intended but misguided legislature can come up with some lame law that targets the rights of the people. So then the sheriff is the one who has to stand in the gap and recognize, hey, I took an oath to the Constitution, just like, by the way, the legislature and the governor did. If they're not going to keep their oath, I'm going to keep mine.
That's the distinction. There is a hierarchy on purpose. Because to support a government that is contrary to the Constitution is to reestablish kings and tyrants, not maintaining limited authority of government and the liberty of the people.
Which do you want your legacy to be? The sheriff that keeps his oath, or the sheriff that made an empty promise and is just an enforcer of the king and will run roughshod over the people's rights, the people's lives, liberty, property, their businesses, their family, their freedom? That's really the question. Are you a king's enforcer, or do you work for the people?
The office of the sheriff carries an enormous power. A power to say no to the President of the United States when he issues an executive order contrary to the Constitution of the state, contrary to the Constitution of the United States. The sheriff has the authority to say no to Congress and the Supreme Court when their laws and their opinions contradict the constitutions. The sheriff has an authority and a duty to say no to the governor, to the state attorney general, to the state legislators, to the county commission, to the city council, to everyone at state and local level when their orders, their edicts, their laws, their ordinances contradict. That's a great power. But you have to know who your sheriff is. And that your sheriff has a morality and an understanding and a courage and a strength to say, I will not enforce a law that contradicts the Constitution. And on that same note, you have to have a sheriff that won't use that power to deprive the people of their rights for his own personal greed, avarice, political gain, or station.
Really operating outside the bounds of the rule of law, or one not focused on defending your rights, you're talking about a serious danger. to your rights, your life, liberty, and property.
You don't need a sheriff, like the sheriff in Hillsborough County, Florida, for political reasons arresting a pastor for having church.
My name is Rodney Howard Brown, and I pastor the River Tampa Bay Church. I realized where we were headed because I could see the telltale signs, what they were planning to do with the lockdowns. I called our sheriff, and who's a friend of mine. I said, Sheriff, they're going to lock everything down. I said, we are an essential service. We feed 1,000 families a week, and I'm not shutting down. We also have a healing school here for people that come with incurable diseases, dying of cancer and everything in between. I'm not doing it. I come from Africa. We go to villages where there's Ebola, there's yellow fever, and everything in between. And now I must suddenly shut down the church. We're not doing it. That never even crossed my mind. There was not even an option. So the sheriff said, no, look, you are an essential service, and told me I was safe. And the media came after him. And of course, I got arrested. And I had helicopters over the roof. I had to turn myself in and cuff me. I was in the slammer probably 40 minutes. And they called me the COVID guy. I knew what the law of the land is. The supreme law is the Constitution. That no governor, no mayor, no city councilor, no president can make an order and call that the law. When the founding fathers put together the Constitution, they were in the middle of a major, actual fact, real pandemic at the time. There was nothing in the Constitution that says this Constitution is now suspended, or in the unlikely event of a pandemic, the Constitution is suspended. Absolutely not. So I knew that I had the law with me. Well, the bottom line is everybody was horrified. I'm the first pastor to get arrested like in 150 years, keeping the church open with 2 bogus charges for endangering the people, which we didn't, and then breaking the law. We never broke any law, and we never endangered anybody. We have 4,200 members on our books. We've never lost one member, not one member. We just purpose in our heart. We're not shutting down, and we'll never shut down. And we're standing against everything that the WHO says not to do. Can't meet, can't clap, can't sing, can't hug, can't have communion, can't baptize in water, can't dedicate babies, can't have you. Excuse me. I'm not bowing to you. I already know what my authority is, and I will never bow. Period. It's not even negotiable. The Lord has been very gracious and kind to us and helped us. And everything here at the ministry, because we would not bow, has literally exploded, and it's given people a sense of, if they can stand, if Pastor Ronnie can get arrested, I can stand too. We're not stopping. We'll never stop. We'll never comply. It'll be a cold day in hell with the devil singing Frosty the Snowman. We will never bow, and we'll never comply. It's time for you to stand up and say no. And I'm probably going to irritate some people by what I say. They might not even use this clip in the movie. But it's time for some of you, put your hand in your pants and find your testicles. And draw a line in the sand and say, this is not happening, not on my watch. What kind of a shepherd allows the wolf to come in and devour the sheep? Explain that to me. A shepherd is someone that protects the flock. A shepherd is one that would even take the wolf biting them to protect the flock.
That's the example of the opposite of a good sheriff.
Who would have imagined that we would be here 2.5 centuries after the founding of this nation, and you have a sheriff arresting a pastor for having church? It's mind-boggling to me. It's frightening how far we have strayed from people, one, knowing what their rights are, and number 2, respecting them and expecting them to be respected and protected by those we elect to represent us.
Lack of commitment to the oath of office, and lack of courage. Your sheriff is your first and your last line of defense. Your sheriff makes the difference at the end of the day.
When COVID hit, obviously everybody saw the behavior of so many people, including the church. It just seemed very chaotic. And I remember that moment when people were making, just fast decisions. We're shutting down, this thing's bad. No one knows how intense this virus is. And so I just paused. I got in my prayer closet and I said, Lord, what do you want us to do? He said, keep my lighthouse open. He said, this will be known as America's not just great storm, but great divide. We're going to seek the face of God. If people can't come to the house of God in the midst of chaos, where can they go? And it was really that simple. And then really the strangest thing, something I never thought would occur. One of the Sunday morning services, I go home, I've got a voicemail on the church phone. And the voicemail was from the New Mexico State Police. And the officer said that New Hope Revival Church is non-essential and must shut down.
Hello, this is Officer New Mexico State Police. This is in reference to the New Hope Revival Church. We have a couple of complaints stating that the church is still open and running during church hours. Just to let you guys know that you guys are non-essential and this business should be closed down until further notice, until this epidemic is over and completed with, and until the governor gives orders to reopen.
I felt the spiritual shockwaves of that moment. Like, we have just entered into a whole nother world. The day that the state police calls the church phone demanding we must shut down, and takes it a step further, verbalizes, you're non-essential. I listened to that voicemail, I paused for a moment and thought, okay, we're not shutting this church down. I knew I needed to connect with the sheriff. I knew it was the chief law enforcement of the region. I didn't know what this would look like, amongst the parameters of what was happening, but I knew, hang on here, I'm going to the sheriff.
I was visited by one of the local pastors of the New Hope Revival Church.
I said, Sheriff, told him who I was, though we probably know who we are from the community, and I said, I just received a voicemail from the New Mexico State Police. Says the New Hope Revival Church is non-essential and must shut down.
I'd never forget it, because he'd come in and he said, Sheriff, I've been watching you sheriffs, specifically you, over the past couple of years, he said, and you guys have taken really hard stances in protecting our Second Amendment rights that are under attack in Santa Fe.
And I said, listen, I saw 29 sheriffs stand for gun rights. I want to know if you'll stand for God rights. And he looked me right in the eyes and he goes, Pastor, I will defend you, even if it means I got to go to jail myself.
And of course, being a student of the Constitution, it was, it's a complete document. The Bill of Rights is put in there because it's not just one that you pick and choose, and tomorrow we don't care about this one. I said I take the whole document completely serious.
We're ready to go to war. I've got the sheriff. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know if the state police are coming back next week, but all I know is this sheriff just told me that he's willing to go to jail for the Constitution. And I knew at that moment I'm actually dealing with a real constitutional sheriff that's willing to wear a pair of handcuffs.
I told him I'd be in touch with him, and I would come up with something. That we're not going to shut our churches down.
It was interesting because, he came just like he's going to work any other day, cowboy hat, gun on his side, badge, and he said, Pastor, I'd like to address the congregation. I'm going to equip you on your constitutional rights, the stance, the God-given rights that you have to freely assemble. If any tyrannical governor or government seeks to trample on your rights, You need to know that I'm going to be that barrier between the government and the rights of this church. We started seeing the New Mexico State Police kind of, waiting outside the door. They weren't messing with the service. They didn't do anything like that. But then they'd pull in, and the sheriff's there. He's guarding the door. He really was. He was going to be that barrier. So a few Sundays in a row, he keeps coming. He's standing by the door. New Mexico State Police, there they are, thinking, okay, we're going to engage in something. The sheriff's standing there. And what I loved about our sheriff is he was really looking for a peaceful solution. He was not looking for a place of conflict.
So I'd actually set a meeting with the state police, and we actually had met at the New Hope Revival Church.
And he called a meeting. He said, I want to have a meeting with the New Mexico State Police, myself. I believe it was the captain, or he looks at me and goes, now give us your opinion. And I said to him, I go, while y'all spend your career, I know you took an oath of office to defend the rights under the Constitution, defend my rights, but while you spend your career listening to this governor and obeying these mandates, I said the only thing worse than someone dying of COVID-19 is that they die of COVID-19 without Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, and they burn in hell for eternity.
It allowed the pastors in the community to lay out their objections to this and lay out their case for it. Allowed the state police to lay out their case. And unfortunately, we're state police officers. It's the governor's order. We work for the governor. Our jobs are contingent and dependent upon it. And so we've got to do it.
Obviously, we didn't see eye to eye. The governor had said, go shut this church down, basically, or at least serve them or cite them and let that progress into something else. I just made it clear, I will not shut this church down. We will remain open.
So we knew that it was just going to be a situation where we agreed to disagree and essentially told him, I've got this. For the most part, state police are here to assist on anything that we need assistance with. But I told him on this one here, we've got it. Just go ahead and back off.
But that next Sunday, within a couple of weeks, I'm preaching on a Sunday morning, and I see the state police car through the glass doors.
So about a week later, they got word. They had a couple of state police officers that were parked across the street from the church.
They pulled in here, and there's still that sense of, it felt like harassment. They got a call. We're open, Obviously, we didn't. There's not an end to this. We had our conversation. We know we don't see eye to eye, but we thought we might have found a place of at least agreement. I'm not shutting down, and they need to consider at least the rights of the church.
So the minute that happened, I knew it was desperate times call for desperate actions. And I'd remembered getting to attend Chris Ann Hall seminar in Albuquerque, and she had talked about the Shire Reeves.
And that next Sunday morning,
New Mexico law specifically recognizes that the sheriff has the right, under situations where there's an emergency that's been declared.
I don't know, I don't think anybody knew. It was just something God had put inside of our sheriff.
To deputize members of the community if necessary.
And he deputized our entire church.
A clause in the governor's shutdown order that said law enforcement were not under the guidelines of her mass gathering order or her restrictions or limitations.
It was so powerful because we stood there thinking we've got conflict with law enforcement, but yet we've got law enforcement.
Every Sunday from that point forward, I would be calling a special deputy meeting at the New Hope Revival Church.
And I know behind the scenes, our sheriff was so adamant and so strong in this constitutional position that it didn't matter what what ramifications. It didn't matter what the media was going to say about it. It didn't matter because, we had news stations contacting us. It didn't really matter to him what type of recoil came with this. We are going to defend the constitutional rights, the God-given rights that was given to this church to freely assemble. It shook the governor. It shook her so intensely because she knew now, like, hang on here, this thing is went. Now keep in mind, we're deputized. I receive a knock at my door, at my home on Mother's Day by the New Mexico State Police.
I actually showed up at the preacher's house and issued him a cease and desist order, telling him he had to shut the church down.
And he goes, I got to serve you with a cease and desist order. And I said, hang on, didn't you take an oath to defend my rights? Yeah, I did, but this mandate, and they give me all this stuff. And I said, but I've been deputized by our sheriff. And he goes, really?
As I told the governor in her office, that I'm going to use the provisions of the law just like she does. And if you're going to put a provision in the law that recognizes that the sheriff has the authority to deputize, especially in an emergency, members of the community, she was the one that was saying it was the emergency.
And all he said that day on my doorstep is, he goes, all I know is I have to serve you, Pastor, today. I have been sent here to serve you today. And we knew it was a direct, without saying it, he couldn't say it, but you could tell by the emotion and the feeling and everything and the verbiage that he used that was directly from the governor.
I knew first and foremost that there's a separation of powers. The governor is not a lawmaker, she's a law signer. Even under New Mexico Constitution, it says that within 14 days of this order, she's got to convene a special session of our legislative body. She failed to do this. She violated the state's constitution there. Why am I going to go in furtherance of violating the Constitution when we have a clear distinction between what her duties and responsibilities are and what the duties and responsibilities are of our legislative body? I'm happy to say that New Hope Revival Church remained open during the entire shutdown. Not a single case of COVID came out of that church. This is my duty and responsibility. I raised my right hand and said I was going to ensure that the constitutional safeguards that were placed in the Constitution, recognizing that these weren't given by man, these weren't given by the Board of County Commission, the governor, or the President of the United States. These were given to us by God. These are inalienable rights that we were endowed by our Creator with. So to me, I wasn't doing anything historic, or I wasn't doing anything that was heroic. I was doing what I told everyone when I raised my right hand that I would do.
One of the greatest obstacles that we have in achieving a breakthrough in understanding regarding the sheriff is the mass media.
We're going to have to get over this animosity and the demonizing of police in this country.
We'll show you all of these instances of abuse of power and make the American people think that that's everybody.
Confidence has been shaken between law enforcement and the community. If sheriffs and deputies knew and were devoted to the idea that my primary job is to defend the rights of the citizens, and then if the residents knew that, the residents know that, and then they know that they have sheriffs and deputies and law enforcement that are dedicated to defending their rights, then I think that would go a long way in restoring the confidence in law enforcement throughout this country. We need accountability, but we have to work together. Law enforcement and their communities have to work together.
I want the sheriffs, I want the deputies, I want the police officers to know just how important they are.
As we began to talk to so many sheriffs across the country, I would ask them, why did you get into this line of work? I was sort of stunned at how consistent the answer was out of the mouth of nearly 100 sheriffs. The common answer was, I wanted to serve the people of my community. I just heard and felt this sense of service from the sheriffs, this sense of love of people.
I've seen the role of the office of the sheriff, and you're in a place to really help the community, be engaged with the people, and you really work for the people. I wanted to be a sheriff. So you're there as a public servant to protect their rights. I've always had a really good relationship with our community. You know them by a first name basis. They know you by a first name basis. You see these people every day. I mean, whether you're having breakfast with them at the local cafe, you're going to the local football games, your kids are going to school together. So you really, it's like an extended family. You really get to know people. If they can't find you in their office, they know where you live at. They show up at your door. So, it's great.
Well, it's something I've always wanted to do ever since I recall being in the 8th grade, thinking that, I really wanted to help people. It wasn't so much about catching bad guys, but we're in a unique situation that we can protect people from bad people, like criminals, but we can also protect them from government overreach, like a city mayor who's rogue or a federal government who's out of control. Being a servant is what it's all about. And as a sheriff, you're a servant of the people. They voted you in because they want someone who's watching out for them.
My job is to represent the community, so I go out, I talk to people, I answer questions, I let them see a face to the name of sheriff. The only person who is the sheriff's boss, or the only people, are we the people. So there is nobody except for your constituents who are your boss. And they want to see you out there doing what's right. We are 100% dedicated to this community, and we show it every day by being more than just policemen. Sometimes you got to be a counselor. Sometimes you got to be just a friend. And that's where we're at.
Well, the role of the sheriff obviously is to protect the people of the county. I mean, that's the first role of government, is protection of the people. And when I say protection, I mean from the bad guy, and I mean from bad actors in government. To me, anyway, law enforcement's not about just arresting everybody that runs afoul of the law. It's about helping people, not only people that have got in trouble with the law, but helping people that are down on their luck. Really, the thing that I found brought me the most joy was being able to help people that needed help. People expect you to be available when they want to talk to you, and the door's always open. If the federal government, the state government, or somebody is acting against the Constitution towards one of your citizens, you need to take a stand and protect the citizen. That's what you swore an oath to do when you swore an oath to the Constitution when you took office. I took my first oath when I was 18 years old when I joined the military. I swore to support, protect, and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I took it serious then, and I have not rescinded that oath yet, so I feel like I'm still obligated to that oath today.
There has to be a commitment.
So you have to know, one, what your role is, what you're called to do. And then number two, what is right, and then make a decision before the crisis arises that you're going to do what's right.
There is no greater service to the community than to be a defender of the rights, the liberties, the properties of the people. So many times I hear sheriffs say, police officers say, well, isn't that a violation of separation of powers, Chrisanne, for me to say that law is unconstitutional? I thought that was the judge's job to say that a law is unconstitutional. Well, yeah, it is the judge's job to say the law is unconstitutional, that's true. But he's not the only one. Each branch, each person in government has a co-equal authority in check and balance. And the very oath of office says, I do solemnly swear that I will support, defend, protect the Constitution. That promise creates a duty to be able to know the difference between a law that is consistent with the Constitution and a law that is inconsistent with the Constitution. It is not complicated. One of the greatest deceptions that has fallen across America, to the people of America, to our sheriffs, to our police officers, is this errant idea that the Constitution is extremely complicated and you must be a scholar of decades or a law professor or a politician to understand the Constitution. That is a lie. The people who wrote and ratified the Constitution wrote reams and reams, making specific reference to why they wrote what they wrote. We don't have to guess. We don't have to form think tanks. And we don't have to have decades of precedent. They wrote it all down. We just have to read it.
Doing the right thing is not always easy. In fact, doing the right thing 9 times out of 10 is hard.
Number one, the American people have been educated on the wrong things about the Constitution since the mid-1800s. You have people addicted to the provisions, the free stuff they get from government. They're gonna push back because they don't want you to rock the boat. Things that are hard are the things that have the greatest value. Thomas Paine wrote this in December of 1776. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. If there's one thing that I want every person who's watching this, whether you be a sheriff, a deputy police officer, family of a police officer, a legislator, a governor, a person in your community, it's never wrong to stand up for what you believe in. It's never wrong to stand up for your rights. It's never wrong to stand up for liberty. Mercy Otis Warren, my favorite founding mother, said this: "We will stand against tyranny today, or our children will bow tomorrow." It's never wrong to do the right thing. So many sheriffs think that their job is to just simply enforce the law. No, Sheriff. That was your job 1,200 years ago under the king. Your job changed 1,000 years ago. This year, 1,000 years ago, your job changed from that blind enforcer of the command of the crown to a defender of the lives, the liberties, the properties of the people, not just simply against citizen criminals, but by very nature against an overreaching government. A government that's forgotten its proper role. A government that has forgotten, as the Declaration of Independence lays out, the purpose of government is to secure the rights that are bestowed upon us by the nature of our creation. When government forgets that, when people in government forget that and talk about taking property without due process, talk about locking us down without just compensation, without a jury trial, taking our properties, when those in government talk about disarming the people or restricting the arms and ammunition that we are allowed to keep and bear. When government and those in government forget its essential, primary, sole purpose is to secure our rights to do all these things. That's why the office of the sheriff exists. It's the promise that the sheriff makes, the deputies make, the police officers make, as if they look every person in their community in the eye.
You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep. My faith
Like that. It
will
was really to
stay.
help people, and I suppose there was a little bit of an adrenaline rush that, you know, the lights and siren and the catching the bad guys and things of that nature, you know, and then just one thing led to another.
Especially mine. My community was targeted, and they were coming in and trying to shut down our gun stores and businesses, and I literally stood toe to toe with the gun store owners and said, "You're not coming in here without a search warrant. We're not closing this business."